Friends, we Indians know about Israel-Palestine conflict. Every time Hamas launches the rockets aimed at Israelis, and Israel responds with bombs causing immense destruction in Gaza. But this picture is incomplete and one-sided. It appears as if the fight originates from Hamas alone. But what is the ground reality? What is the history of this conflict? And how do conscientious Israelis who are serious about the peace in this region see this particular fight? So, in an effort to understand the conflict from one of the important fighters of peace, we are going to speak to Rami Elhanan, a graphic designer and an 8th-generation resident of Jerusalem in Israel-Palestine. We are deliberately using the word Israel-Palestine. More and more people today are making use of the word Israel-Palestine rather than using Israel alone, to emphasize the fact that the region was known as Palestine earlier, and Israelis alone do not have the monopoly rights on the region. Our friend Rami advocates peace and reconciliation, dialogue, and all these things. He knows what he means by peace because he had fought the war in Sinai Desert as an Israeli reserve soldier and lost some of his best friends. But that is only part of the story. In his personal life, he has paid the heavy price to come to understand peace. He knows how precious life is in the hardest possible way. And for sure, he knows that conflict is not worth the death of a single human being, be it Israeli or Palestinian. In his unique way, Rami, along with a Palestinian friend by name Bassam Aramin, have traveled around the globe carrying their message of peace and dialogue. So let us speak to this exceptional Israeli man. We had first met them in Mumbai in April 2018 and had a dialogue at the hall of Sarvodaya Mandal in Grant Road. I have with me Mr. Jatin Desai, a senior and distinguished journalist from my country. When it comes to dialogue with Rami, I can find no person better suited than Jatin, who has been an exceptional voice from India, trying to bring together the sane and peace-loving voices from Pakistan. Jatin has traveled to Pakistan more than 20 times, and Pakistan is described as an enemy country by most of the Indians. And he has traveled to Pakistan more than 20 times and has been instrumental in freeing Indian fishermen and others who are languishing in Pakistani jails. So with this introduction, let us turn to Rami. Rami, can you tell us something short about your personal history, how you have come to this particular position from being an ordinary Israeli? You have had a number of turns in your life. So can you say briefly something about it to our Indian audiences?
Thank you, Ashok, for this introduction. And I'm really honored to be with you tonight and share with you some of my thoughts. I'm a product of the Israeli upbringing and brainwashing system. I was an ordinary Jewish Israeli guy, born and raised in Jerusalem, subject to the Israeli educational system. I served in the army as a armored tank corps, and I participated in several wars: the attrition war, the Yom Kippur war, the Lebanon war, and I never ever put myself in a position of getting out of my identity as an ordinary Israeli. And the key event in my life was the Yom Kippur War, in which we have started this war with a company of 11 tanks and finished it with only 3. And I came out of it a very angry and bitter and disappointed young man, and started a way of being an anarchist in my own country, being in exile in my own country, And being very, very cynical, I'm a graphic designer. I did graphic design for the right wing, for the left wing, whoever paid me. And I was living in a big bubble with my family. And this went on until about 24 years ago. On the 4th of September 1997, my daughter was blown up by two Palestinian suicide bombers in the center of Jerusalem. And the bubble that we lived inside was blown up to millions of pieces. 1 year later, I joined the Parent Circle, which is an organization of Israeli and Palestinian bereaved families determined to create peace, to create dialogue and reconciliation. And the meeting with these bereaved Palestinian families, for me, was the changing point. It happened 23 years ago. It was the first time ever in my life I've met Palestinians as human beings. And ever since then, I started a journey towards the other side that was deliberately and viciously hidden from me for so many years of trying to redefine my identity as a Jew, as an Israeli, and as a human being.
Jatin?
Yeah, Rami, really, it's very your story. Your story, one can find similar stories in India also, India and Pakistan also. Because it is said globally that two region or two issues, that's the Palestinian issue and Kashmir issue, are the most volatile issues. And they need to be resolved. And unless they are resolved, it will be very difficult for peace to become a reality. So my question is, it's a very surprising what's happening recently in Israel, because Netanyahu, in all probability, he will be out, and Naftali Bennett is likely to be next Prime Minister of Israel. And again, there is basically no difference as far as ideology is concerned between Netanyahu and Naftali Bennett. In fact, Naftali Bennett can be described as a more right-winger. So whenever something happened in India, like war scenario, it always helped right-wingers in India. I'm really surprised what happened in Israel, because after 11-day war, generally in India, it was believed that Netanyahu will manage 61 or 61 plus seats in the Knesset. That he will manage because he has 30. He needs 31 or 31 plus extra. But it didn't happen. Though Netanyahu, in all this 11-day war, he himself projected as only he can save Israel. But he didn't get support from smaller parties. Parties like Labour Party, parties like right-wing parties, and even pro-Arab parties, Palestinian parties. They are now supporting Bennett. So what is the reason? Even warmongering is not supporting Netanyahu. Can it be interpreted as the people of Israel are tired, or by heart they do not want war with Palestinian or with anyone else? They want to live in peace.
No, I'm afraid this is far from being true. Israelis are not tired. The only thing Israelis are tired of is Netanyahu. And the reasons are not war or peace, and the reasons are not right or wrong. The reason is Netanyahu is now 14 years in power for the second time. And he put himself in a position of being corrupt, to its bones,
Yeah.
and play a role of a king in a country which every Jew has three opinions. So the whole 5 or 6 election campaigns were not about peace and war, and not about right or left. It was about Netanyahu yes or Netanyahu not. Most of the Israeli public is right-wingers. Most of the Israeli public, more than 70 members of the Knesset are right-wingers, and they don't have any problem in doing this war again and again and again. This is not the problem. Most of the Israelis are living in bubbles, are living in their houses, in their coffee houses, in their they don't pay any price for the continuation of the occupation. They don't know, they don't want to know. And the Israeli media is responsible for not telling them, because the Israeli media is also playing part in this hiding situation. So the answer to your question is this is not the issue. The war is not the issue. The Israelis have the tendency to look at reality through the very narrow keyhole of the last event. And if you ask Israelis why this last eruption occurred, they will tell you that because Hamas shot 2 rockets on Jerusalem. Nobody will tell you about Sheikh Jarrah. Nobody will tell you about the entrance to Damascus Gate in Jerusalem. And nobody tell you about the brutal police brutality in Al-Aqsa Mosque, which created this chain of events. So it is very difficult to talk about the Israeli public as a rational, grown-up public. They are not.
But now, given the fact that there is one Islamic movement party within the Israeli coalition of Naftali Bennett, with the leader named Mansour Abbas in the coalition, even with that, it will not make any difference according to you?
No, because they don't have any alternative. In order to create this coalition of 61, they are willing to sit with the devil itself. And for them, this Muslim party, which is a right-wing party in terms of religion, in terms of every aspect of political life, and really being unacceptable by most of the Palestinian public in Israel, they are willing to sit with them and to enjoy their support just because they don't want Netanyahu. And they are willing to do anything in their power not to continue with Netanyahu. And this is the reason why they cooperate with this Islamic party. I don't see a future for this government. I think the differences between the parts of this government are so deep and so huge that every little issue can create a problem that they will not be able to live with it. So it can take 1 month or 2 months or 6 months. It will blow up because water cannot go along with oil.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Now, looking at the peace process, basically, what are the obstacles in the peace process? Can the Israeli government or various organizations in the social sector bring about Hamas to the conference table? Is Hamas ready for any kind of negotiation?
Wow, that's a complicated question. Hamas is an Israeli invention. Hamas was created in 1985 by the Israeli security forces as a weight against the PLO, which was basically secular and political. And the idea of the Israelis to create a religious organization which will do a charity and draw the attentions of the Palestinians from the occupation to the everyday life. And the result was exactly the opposite. Hamas became political, became a terrorist organization, became highly motivated in ending the occupation, and fanatic and extremist and radical. And Hamas today enjoys the support of most of the Palestinians. If there were elections in the Palestinian society today, Hamas would have won in a landslide without any question.
Oh, I see.
Now it's extremely beneficial for Israel to have Hamas as a partner, because if you have an opposition that do not recognize you, that are not willing to give up under any circumstances, it's very convenient to say that there is no one to talk to and there is no one to talk about, because if there is no one to talk to, then there is no need to give up anything. And the main purpose of Israel is not to give 1 inch of land to be able to create a Palestinian state in any kind of form. Now, Hamas itself has 2 branches. One is the ideological, religious one, and one is the political, pragmatic one. And Hamas have said, even Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, who's one of the leaders of Hamas, and who was assassinated by Israel, said that they will never give up 1 inch of Palestine. But they are willing to have hudna with the Israelis. Hudna in Arabic means ceasefire. They know they cannot throw the Jews to the sea. They know they cannot destroy Israel. They are clever enough to understand that the power, the balance of power, cannot provide them what they want. And they are willing to have a ceasefire for 100 years. But this is kind of a message which Israelis are not exposed to. For Israelis, the definition of Hamas is a terrorist organization, and again, there is no one to talk to, and there is nothing to talk about.
Yeah, I'll take Ashok's question a little forward, because I see quite a similarity. What you are talking about, Israel and Hamas, I see similarity in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, in the sense that, for example, United States is going to be completely withdrawn its troops along with NATO by September. So there is a pressure on India to have a dialogue with Taliban. The pressure is coming from United States, China, Russia, Turkey, and various other countries. And there is now, it looks like there is such a change in Indian policy, Indian foreign policy, because India's policy, stated policy, is not to have dialogue with any militant or terrorist organization. But now there is a thinking that we need to have some kind of dialogue with Taliban. This is absolutely changed from our stated policy. So likewise, the global scenario is changing. And in that, is any pressure coming on Israel from Joe Biden especially? Because it looks like some change in the policy of Joe Biden from Trump to have some kind of dialogue with Hamas, because ceasefire was an important step. So how you will go from ceasefire?
I mean, you cannot compare the situation of India and Pakistan and Afghanistan and the Taliban to the state of Israel and its relations with the United States. Israel is practically the 52 state of United States. It's being supported by the United States, is being supplied with the edge of military equipment and billions and billions and billions of dollars annually, which support the American industries. The basic element here, and I'm confronting it all the time when I speak at high schools, when I speak to the Israeli media, and they put in my face, "Are you supporting Hamas, the terrorist organization?" And I tell them, I have no particular reason to like Hamas. Hamas are the killers of my daughter. But I will be willing to talk to the devil itself in order to save one drop of blood. Now, if you look at Hamas and you use this term of terrorist organization, George Washington was a terrorist for the English. And Nelson Mandela was also a terrorist. And Menachem Begin, our prime minister, was a terrorist to the British. When you don't have guns, when you don't have tanks or airplanes, you blow yourself up. When you have the Hamas and the Taliban and all these organizations are political organizations. And if you want to have a solution, you need to find out the interests, define your lines, define what is sacred and cannot be compromised and what can be compromised, and create a negotiation in order to solve a problem. Otherwise, it won't be solved by itself. I don't think that Joe Biden have a clear idea of where he's going to. I don't think Joe Biden have the power of coercing Israel to create a dialogue with Hamas. I don't see it happen under any circumstances. What Joe Biden can do is enforce a ceasefire like he did in this last event. And Israel is dependent on the American support. The change will come only if the American public will understand the injustice of this situation and change its overall support in Israel. Now, if you look at the outcome of the American elections, more than 70 million Americans supported Trump, supported this clown without any political message, with all stupidity and 70 million people voted for him these last elections. So I don't see the change happening very in the near future. I'm sorry.
One more question. The younger generation of Jews from USA, in one small article, 2-3 lines have read. See, New York Times article says that overall, younger American Jews are less attached to Israel than older generation. About half of Jewish adults under 30 describe themselves as emotionally connected to Israel, compared with about 2/3 of Jews over age 64, according to a major survey published last week by the PEW Research Center. And you can see a few organizations springing up, just like Jewish Voice for Peace becoming a college campus phenomena. And there's one body called If Not Now. So these younger people are, trying to do some change. What can you say about them?
There is a change in the American Jewish public opinion. And most of the American Jews, which most of them are Democrats, feel that something basically wrong is going on here, and more voices are being heard of not giving Israel automatic support. And more young Jewish guys have the guts and the audacity to open their mouths and criticize Israel publicly. Having said that, still Israel is in the center of Jewish life. It represents the Jewish future. It represents the Jewish dignity. And more than everything else, it represents the Jewish victimhood mentality. Now, there you will find no Jew around the world which will criticize the very existence of Israel, because Israel is a kind of a miracle given by God as a compensation for the Holocaust. And most of the Jews will not turn their backs to Israel. The criticism of the Israeli policy is getting deeper and deeper and louder all the time.
Now, running parallel to that, you can see some currents in the American politics, where young voices such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or she is having a Mexican origin. Then Ilhan Omar, she is having a Somalian origin. Ilhan Omar. Rashida Tlaib, she is having a Palestinian descent. So all these forces, these are all young people, and they might be able to exert some small pressures on Biden administration. What do you?
This is the beginning of a process. It's a good change in the right direction, but again, I remind you that more than 70 million Americans are right-wingers. And I don't know how to measure it, but among the Democrats, the people who are so afraid of the left-wingers are also millions and millions. This is why Bernie Sanders couldn't get the nomination. And they are really afraid of this kind of stuff. So the change will take time. There are voices, there is a mood, but again, like the change that took place in the Vietnam War, which took them about 15 years to make the change, I'm afraid it will take a lot of time.
Yeah. Jatin?
Rami, I'm just curious to know that today the states have become too powerful, and Israel is absolutely much more powerful than many other states. But if you see the Sri Lankan state is too weak compared to Israel, but they could crush LTTE, which was one of the most organized militant organization. They could crush it. So obviously, Hamas or any other organization cannot stand before Israel's power. If we see history of last 50 years, only two nations became independent from the state in which they were part of through armed struggle. That's one is Bangladesh, and again, Bangladesh history is a very different history. And another is Eritrea. So now the scenario is you can't achieve what you want from weapons or from armed struggle. You can win only by peaceful means, by mobilizing public opinion, by mobilizing international community. I think that is the only way, and where the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi comes. So I want to know that is there any thinking within Israel or within Palestine that let us try, I'll not use word Gandhian way or like that, but let us give another piece, another chance. Let us have some kind of dialogue. Let us have peaceful means.
Well, I'm afraid and sorry to say that there is no such thing existing. There are people like us who are doing dialogue with the other side. There are some political parties in several extents who make this connection, but the overall picture is a zero-sum game. Your gain is my loss. And for Israel, the official policy of the right wing is that we cannot allow ourselves to let go the sword that we are holding, because the minute we will let go of the sword, we will be dead. It doesn't matter that we are a nuclear power. It doesn't matter that we are the 10th most strongest army in the world, fighting a group of terrorists which are, at the best case, I don't know, 5,000. The thing is not logical. The thing is a mentality. And the mentality in Israel is a victimhood mentality. We carry on our backs 3,000 years of victimhood. It's not an invented victimhood. It's a real victimhood. We were subject to atrocities throughout our history. And the peak of it will be Holocaust. And we love our victimhood mentality. We don't allow anyone else to be victim. And we put it in the heads and in the minds of our youth. When they are 16 years old, we send them to Auschwitz. And when they come back draped with the national flag and the slogan, "Never again." And the next day they join the army, they stand in a checkpoint, and they have to make a decision whether this 70 years old guy is a terrorist or just a grandfather, which is really inhuman. And this is the state of Israel, state of mind for the last 54 years at least, even more. And this is the education system, and this is the whole essence of the country. So there is no, when we get into high schools and we speak to the students over there, our sound is very, very unique and rare. And they don't listen and they don't hear such voices. And the reaction is accordingly.
Rami, what is the condition of NGOs or civil society in Israel who work among the Palestinians as well as Israelis? I've heard about Combatants for Peace and Parent Circle from you. I have heard another things about, a good number of things about breaking the silence, these organizations. So what is the overall picture of the civil society in Israel?
We are under constant attack. We are like people who are trying to draw water from the ocean with a little spoonful of little holes. All these organizations like B'Tselem, like Combatants for Peace, like Breaking the Silence, and all these organizations are doing sacred word in keeping our basic moral up and fulfill the commandment that says you don't stand aside while a crime is being committed. But the power of this organization, very much like the power of the dogs barking while the convoy goes on. They cannot be put away, they cannot be silenced. And this is the very importance of their being existing. But the real influence is very, very limited.
Jatin, anything?
Just want to know your opinion, Rami.
Yeah.
The United Nations, the resolution basically calling for a investigation into the violation of human rights or atrocities in Gaza, especially in Gaza. So that's one thing. But again, in that, India abstained. India abstained from the voting. So what do you think the impact of such commission of inquiry, whether because the experience in Sri Lanka is not much encouraging in the sense that it hardly inspired. It hardly inspired because Sri Lanka also suffered a lot during anti-Tamil regime, anti-Tamil killings.
Mhm.
So, just want to know that what you think that's the impact of this commission.
Well, as you said, it's very limited. Israel's biggest fear is to be condemned as doing war crimes. They will not cooperate with any investigation. They will try to get the support of the European countries and the United States against such an inquiry. I myself signed a letter to the justice in Hague asking for inquiry about Israel behavior and war crimes. But I don't have high hopes. Even if an inquiry will start without the cooperation of Israel, its influence will be symbolic. Its influence will not be practical. And I think this is part of our effort because Israel itself cannot change itself. The only change will come from an outside pressure. And it's quite obvious that the vast majority of the people around the world feel that Israel is doing war crimes. But the governments of the Western world are not willing to listen to this voice. And they need to be pushed because they have the key in their hands. The only pressure that can be put on Israel to change its policies and to listen to the criticism from all around the world is by the behavior of the Western governments. And they are not going to change because they carry a deep guilt of what happened to the Jews in the Second World War. And this guilt is a key factor in the behavior of the Western powers towards Israel.
I think it will be, different from what Indians have an image about Israelis as such. This is totally different view, which you have. You want to say something, Jatin?
I think that's fine.
One last question I would like to ask. Before there is something I see. There is something I see on your T-shirt written as Apeirogon. Apeirogon. What is that?
5 years ago, we gave a lecture to a group of writers. Came to our office in Bejala in the West Bank. One of these group was bursting into tears in a way that me and Bassam had to comfort him. His name was Colum McCann. He is a very famous Irish-American writer who wrote many, many books. Several of them were translated to Hebrew. He's an award-winning, very, very successful writer. And he asked permission to write our stories. And he wrote a book which was launched a year ago in January 20. And this is the book. The book is called Apeirogon.
Yeah. I have a copy of that.
You see, it's a big book. And the book immediately won all the prizes. It got into the New York Times bestseller, first place. And it created a huge impact around the world. It was translated to Arabic. It is being translated to Hebrew, to German, to Italian, to French, many other languages. And one distant film creator by the name of Steven Spielberg bought the rights to make a movie out of this book. The book is the story of Bassam and myself. It is built in a way of 1001 stories. Some of them are only one line. Some of them are several pages. And the idea is the story of Scheherazade, you know, the 1001 Nights, where she had to tell a new story every night in order to keep her
like 1001 Arabian stories, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And what Colum says is that we, Bassam and myself, are keep telling our stories again and again and again in order to keep our daughters alive, which is very nice. It was very touching. The book is amazing. I've read it on my way to the United States in the airplane. It has many, many layers. You read about the birds' immigration in the Middle East. You read about the process of creating a rubber bullet. And you read the stories of Bassam and myself. And it's a masterpiece, I have to admit.
Yeah.
So this is Apeirogon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rami. And we had a very, very pleasant, nice talk. And you know, I only hope that it goes to Indian audiences in a big way. Now, if the film comes, ultimately, if the if the film comes, I think it will go to millions of people all over the world, with Rami and Bassam as the central figures. You know, I wish it goes to millions of people and they read the extraordinary story of yours.
I hope so.
And thank you very much on behalf of Vicharvedh and all of us.
Thank you for listening to me. Good night and good week.
Yeah, good week. Yes.